It's week 7 of the Osmo.com NFL strategy. So Chris Randone here, as always, the man, the myth, the legend, Manny Laura himself as well. We're going to take you through a couple things, go through the main slate, break down a little bit of ownership, talk a little strategy, even talk a little bit about Fantasy Cruncher as well. But before we do, Manny Laura, how we doing, my man?
Good, man. Couldn't be any better. Every time I always say it, every time we have another week ahead of us and we're days away, in this case 2 days away, dude, I love it, man. I love it. So just trying to stay on par, not trying to switch up too many things. If I have little leaks in my game, just try to tighten them up before Sunday, and yeah, just keep up with the injury news and stay on top of my game. Really, that's all that matters as of right now, right?
Yeah, I mean, right before the show, guys, Manny and I were talking about we wanna get into a week where it's nothing but roses and a lot of green in the profit. And the thing is I was telling Manny, I'm like, man, you can have weeks where you did everything right, the analysis was there, everything was set up to put you in the best position possible, and it just obviously it doesn't go your way, as it does in a lot of weeks in the NFL. But the one thing that we were discussing is, mentally you just got to stay stable and you got to continue doing what you do, what you know works, sticking with the process, because the moment that becomes a little disorganized, the moment where you just start really going on a downward spiral, essentially with every single thing happening for you in DFS.
Yeah, for sure. And there's been a few weeks where it's pretty. I wouldn't say it's pretty easy to see some outliers. And again, I don't want to sit here making excuses for all of us, right? If I'm like, for example, if I'm playing bad, I'm playing bad. But you also have to recognize where a defense scoring 40 points doesn't happen every week and can definitely skew things, right? Last week's case, I think there were some that had great weeks. No issue with the ones that had great weeks. But there was like no real game stacks went off, and then stacks, there were very few of them that went off. So if you stuck with like a 2-man stack, your original stack we ran in like 1907, then yeah, you probably made some money. But it wasn't one of those weeks where stacks were even remotely close to the point where if you played it, man, you were really far behind. And weeks like that happen in the NFL. Doesn't mean that game stacking is bad. No. Doesn't mean team stacking, having 3-man stacks is bad. No, it didn't work out. We had some bad luck the week before, and then if we made mistakes the week prior, then that's 3 losing weeks in a row. But doesn't mean the process is necessarily bad. We have to combine them all together, not make any mistakes. Hopefully, NFL takes its course, even with some little variance, but not too drastic. And then hopefully the ball fars our way there at the end if we could get that top 1% score or whatever.
Let's talk about last week real quick. We had Stephon Diggs, right? Goes off. I mean, essentially, if you don't have him, you're really not you're not doing much with your week. To be honest with you, it was that much of a difference between him and the next wideout as far as scoring was concerned. But I guess the big question is this, because clearly we've seen what has gone on in the Vikings organization and what's gone on in the passing game the first 6 weeks. Stephon Diggs not necessarily involved, requesting a trade, and obviously he did have ownership though because his price point was there. But for those of us that are on this show watching that didn't have either any shares of Stephon or not enough shares of Stephon, is this one of those things where you said about the defenses? Should we be upset about not having him in our lineups?
Yeah, I think this one comes down to how many lineups you played, right? So, for example, for me, playing 150 every day, you definitely had to have Stephon Diggs. There's no way you did not have Stephon Diggs. And if you didn't, I'd say clear, obvious mistake in the process, right? Where if you play maybe 10 lineups or so, maybe you could have gotten there, maybe. I think when you start getting to 20, 30, 40, 50, then you start saying, yeah, you definitely had to have at least, a couple shares of him. How it worked was you kind of rank stacks, or at least how I do it is you kind of rank stacks the way projections shape out. I'd say Sunday morning, and Kirk Cousins to Stephon Diggs, and then if you're ranking 3-man stacks, Kirk Cousins to Diggs and Thielen was, I'd say, pretty up there when it comes to overall projection. So having a piece of them, or at least a decent amount, if you're playing multiple lineups, yeah, for sure, I think you needed him. And then if you wanted a game stack, there was a clear Alshon Jeffrey on the other side that you could have had too, right? I think Ertz was probably the better play, but if you landed on Alshon because you played multiple instances of that Minnesota Viking stack, then sure, you could have landed on something like that. But it was really advanced strategies that would have gotten you there. If you're the semi-casual player or really don't MME too often, I'd say it was pretty tough to get there.
I think one of the biggest lessons from the whole Stephon Diggs situation, because I've seen a lot of people talk about, I was scared to roster him because he's not getting enough production. Everything's going to Thielen. Cooks in the running game. I mean, if you look deeper beyond just the surface level things, we talked about it last week. Philadelphia, number one rush defense. They pretty much contained Dalvin Cook in that running game a majority of the game. He got into the end zone, yeah, but I don't really credit that as far as the overall, running game aspect of that entire game. And then you have the passing game, which is the worst secondary, essentially in the NFL, giving up the most points to wide receivers as far as fantasy points are concerned throughout the season so far. In reality, his price point as well, it was a good play. And I mean, if you were on that, you definitely benefited gratefully. However, though, it's the biggest thing to learn is don't be scared to roster a player because he's not getting production. Just like these high-priced wide receivers right now, who DeAndre Hopkins, Julio Jones, that are not hitting their potential. Don't be scared because then you're going to miss out on those breakout games because of that fear.
Yeah, for sure. I have this thing where I say it's the what have you done lately for me, right? What have you done lately for me? I mean, what have you done for me lately? It's one of those things where it's if you haven't performed, I'm not going to play you. And then if you haven't performed, or if you go off, all right, now I'm going to play you, type of thing. To where it's whatever you see the previous week. And I mean, we should be smart enough to know that weeks don't play out identical to last week ever, right? Like if Diggs going for 40 something fantasy points last week, the first time this year, all right, now I'm going to play him in week 7. Like, it doesn't work like that, right? Like, it could very well be Thielen this week. It could very well go back to being Dalvin Cook. It could be, I don't know, both pass catchers. I don't know, first time all season Kyle Rudolph does. Like, it could be anyone. And to just blindly say, well, he hasn't done anything. DeAndre Hopkins hasn't caught anything. I'm done playing this guy. That's your bias getting in there, right? And put your biases aside. You have to. It's not a what have you done for me lately. It's not. They don't keep into account what they've done in fantasy. Neither do other teams. It's they're going in with a game plan. We're trying to project games the best we can, and if it didn't work this week, it might work next week. The opponents are going to be completely different. The venues are going to be completely different. One's at home, one's away. Everything changes from week to week. How can the production not change from week to week? So kind of foolish to just say what happened last time is or is not going to happen this time. I think that's bogus, really.
Defenses adjust on a week-to-week basis. Yep. The schemes change on a week-to-week basis. The matchups, the coverage. I mean, this isn't the NBA where we know superstars get their points. It's kind of different because superstars don't necessarily get their points in the NFL because of these changes, these adjustments that are made on a week-to-week basis. So the goal is to do your research, do your analysis, and if you're multi-entering tournaments, have a couple shares of these certain types of plays because these are the plays that will allow you to go ahead and benefit from and put yourself in position to have a great week.
Yeah, for sure. I think injuries are huge too, and people tend to forget. Like someone's not playing this week; it's a completely different person. Can't pretend it's going to be the same exact, not just coverage, but scheme, and then obviously the talent of the player is just not the same. So yeah, a lot of moving pieces, I'd say.
All right, before we go into the slate, let's not forget our wonderful sponsor, guys, Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports. This weekend, they got the $250,000 baller tournament, $25K to first place. And also, this is the best thing is that right now, rake-free, no management fees. So, essentially you're making more if you're cashing and you're profiting from these type of tournaments. Also, keep in mind, if you use the code AWESEMO, if you haven't signed up yet for Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports, AWESEMO, use that code, get yourself $30 in daily fantasy points. This will allow you to go ahead and at least get 3 entries into that tournament. So use the code AWESEMO. You can click it anywhere on the site, any of the NFL articles. Once again, Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports. Thank you. Wonderful sponsor. Here we go, Manny. Week 7, the main slate. I feel a little discouraged the last couple of weeks just because we've had such a great process in breaking down the games, and yet things just haven't gone our way to the extent that we would want it to, right? Don't forget, breaking even in the NFL, I'm okay with that. Having a break-even week, even a little loss, I'm okay with. The first game that we're going to talk about, I feel, is going to have a lot of fantasy implications just because it is the highest over-under on the slate. 54.5 over-under. Los Angeles Rams at the Atlanta Falcons. Rams currently are favorited by 3 points. Now, I want to tell you, now we know this is the highest over-under slate by a margin, actually. I think by 4 or 5 points compared to any other game. And, we saw a new addition. This week, Julio Jones seemed like a great situation for a matchup that a lot of people were talking about early on. The acquisition of Jalen Ramsey now, however, has changed that a little bit because we'll probably see him on Julio. But how do we feel about this game, Manny? And is this going to be the same situation like last week where there were games with the high over-unders and we wanted to play these premium people? However, it didn't work out to kind of what we were talking about. So is that the same situation this week, or can we have a little bit more confidence in this game?
Yeah, so it goes back to what I said about the what have you done for me lately, right? Everyone saw Jared Goff completely crap the bed last week, and all the receivers virtually no points. It was a horrible display of offense from what we think is one of the best offenses in the league, right? It's foolish to think something similar is going to happen again. I just don't see it, right? So for me, it's first of all, let's get to Sunday and see who is going to play, who's active, who's not active, because it seems like they're almost all questionable. Talking the Rams, right? Gurley, Cooks, Kupp to an extent, like everyone, right? So I think mostly all of them play, but if they don't, we have to adjust for that. But realistically, this is the biggest total, the largest total on the slate by far. It's not even close. The second highest total is right at 50 and a half, depending where you're seeing it. This is mid 50s. So this projects to be, if we could lock a shootout ever, it's probably this one, right? Atlanta has just been awful, like to the point where this might be high school defense right now, the way they're playing. This is not even close. So do I like Goff? Yeah, I do have him in my top 3. I also have Matt Ryan in my top 3 when it comes to quarterbacks. And what I love about both teams is there's easy pairings for both. As you guys know, I love game stacking, period. So when you have two teams like the Falcons and the Rams that have clear pairings for their quarterback, Brandon Cooks, Kupp, Woods, and then the other side, Julio Jones, I'd say Ridley and Hooper now have become monsters to the point where Hooper is playing like a top 3 tight end right now. And if you haven't been treating him like so, I think you've lost a decent amount of money. But if you have, Hooper's probably your favorite tight end in the whole year so far. So I absolutely love this game. I don't see how anyone can't. Now it just comes down to what do ownership projections look like, how much of the field is going to be on this game, and then where we can zig and zag to get an advantage over everyone.
Yeah, last week Jared Goff had 29 passing yards in the first half. I mean, it was just, and I think Cooper Kupp had nothing in the first half. It was just a complete domination. To even add to that, Malcolm Brown. I mean, even though he played 69, I think it was 67, 68% of the snaps last week. He had the first drive. It looked like Malcolm Brown was going to go off.
Yep.
It looked like this was a smash spot that this chalk was going to hit. And I mean, after that, he was nowhere to be found. I think after that first drive, I think he had a positive net rushing yards of like 9 or 10 yards after that. And so, speaking of this game this week, what I feel like is a must is, I mean, Matt Ryan, I think he ranks 5th in net expected points per drop pack among all quarterbacks, and he's at least 300 passing yards in every game. So I think for sure Matt Ryan, you can definitely consider him for cash game. But even tournaments, I feel like this is a spot where everyone's complained about Julio. He, hasn't, exceeded expectations much the last couple of games. He hasn't scored since finding, the first 4, I think it was the first 4 games he scored 3 or 4 touchdowns. But here's the thing. He hasn't changed as a wideout. So the thing is regardless if Jalen Ramsey is on him or not, this is still a spot where you shouldn't be scared to roster Julio Jones, in my opinion. And I think because of the Ramsey acquisition, it could drive ownership down a little bit and scare people because of this matchup. I mean, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's the whole, again, just going back to the same thing. Has Julio done well? No. The Ramsey, is he something this week? Maybe. And it's frustrating because if we've all rostered Julio, which we all have, and he hasn't been performing and we haven't been winning, eventually you're going to get tired of playing Julio, right? But here's some underlying things that we need to know about this passing game to just see how important they really are, right? There's 2 guys at the top of the list that are far and away leading the passing leaderboards, right? When it comes to yardage, right? One, obviously, is Patrick Mahomes, not even close. And then Two, the only other quarterback with over 2,000 yards is Matt Ryan. And not even Pat Mahomes has thrown 300 yards in every single game this season. Last time out, Pat Mahomes did not, and I'm not counting yesterday. So Matt Ryan he has 300 passing yards in every game this season. They're 1-5. They're awful. They're terrible. But one thing's for sure, he's going to throw his 300 and he's going to have a few touchdowns. I cannot stop playing Julio because Julio hasn't scored or hasn't had the 25 or 30 fantasy point game. If I tell you his quarterback is going to go throw 302 TDs at a minimum every single week, I have no choice but to keep playing Julio. I have to. There's no way I can see that much yardage and not play his best receiver. So for me, just keep playing him. Remember last season or the season before, whatever it is, I don't know how many weeks he went without a touchdown, only to finish top 3 in every single category in the league. So like, he's elite. You keep treating him elite, and eventually the season will turn around. This is too good of a fantasy spot for these guys every single week for us to just start fading because we're angry at what he's done so far. I think that's bogus.
I think this is a bounce back week for Jared Goff as well. We saw last week the 49ers put so much pressure on him, made him scramble to the point where he didn't know what to do. And the overall defense of the 49ers is fairly well compared to the Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons are not great in pressure rate. They're, I think, last or second to last in adjusted pass defense. So this essentially should help the Rams move the ball. The only gray area I feel like is the running game. I think I want to stay away from that. But in the passing game, I think Kupp, Woods, Cooks, I think they're all in a spot for breakout territory. I think they're all there as far as their targets and shares, so we don't have to worry about that. I really like the Rams side of the ball as far as the passing game. And then on the Lance side, I agree with you. I think, with Matt Ryan, he's going to throw the ball. And these guys are going to get their targets. And I think Julio, no matter what, is always in a position to break out. He's just that talented. And regardless of who's in coverage, I think talent always is superior to a defensive matchup, regardless of the situation. So I love that call. And I think the last person that we should probably look at that's kind of separated himself now and maybe solidifying himself as someone that we could have more confidence in is Devontae Freeman. He's fairly cheap, but he's playing a majority of the snaps now, and he's handling essentially almost all the carries. And he's also getting targets in the passing game. So I think Devontae Freeman could be someone that is sneaky and not necessarily owned as much, that could be in a position to potentially go off.
Yeah, I think it's game script dependent. If they fall behind, I think, kind of sucks. But I think he's okay for the price tag. I think if it was any more expensive, I'd have an issue there. It's just game script dependent. If you think they keep it close or end up having a lead at any point, he's a fine play. I don't know. I think it's a little iffy for me.
All right, our next game, a little bit different narrative. 41 over under. I think it's this one's the lowest on the slate. Dolphins at Bills. Buffalo is a heavy favorite, Manny. They're favored right now by 17 points. Miami, I know that's your team. They gave you a little ray of hope last week. Almost had a chance to win and beat the Redskins. Man, what a barn burner! I can't believe that NFL Red Zone actually showed some of the game. But here we are. But here we are. For myself, before I let you get into it, I don't see much that I have interest in. But I would love to hear to see if you have any interest of any of these plays in this game.
Do not have a single player from this game, man. Miami's almost never going to score. It doesn't even matter. In Buffalo, pretty tough place to play. The defense is very, very good. So Miami by default has to be. If you're owning these guys, I mean, it's because you want to be super duper uber contrarian, and I don't know, you're hoping for some sort of magic, but not happening. And then Buffalo, where's the real upside for me, right? Like I love game stacking. I love stacking multiple players from a team. Like Buffalo's just never that team. So I also think as long as we are dogs by 15 plus, I love it every single time. I'm the biggest Miami fan. And if we're Miami fans, we're rooting for more losses. So please, Buffalo, just get us out of there. I hate that we even had a chance last week. I was praying for a loss, and Miami came through. So that was one of the most exciting losses I've ever seen, by the way. But yeah, that was pretty nice. I don't have anyone from this game. Not even close.
I think it's someone to point out. I think Josh Allen is always considered for cash games. He obviously is a dual threat quarterback, can get you with his feet, but he's also in a matchup this week playing against the NFL's worst pass defense. So I think that's something to consider. And also, Zay Jones is going to be out of the Bills passing game. And I think what interests me here just a little bit, just for tournaments, and I'm talking from a multi-entering perspective, is John Brown. Someone that's probably going to get a lot of good high leverage looks. Strong tournament play, in my opinion, because of this, league worst pass defense. But also, they rank last in deep ball adjusted yards per attempt, which I think for Brown, he is a deep threat, could benefit him. Because looking at all the other guys, Cole Beasley, slot, short passes, I think deep threat material, John Brown. So, I think outside of that, though, I don't really have much interest. And this game looks nasty, man. 17 points. I don't even know if Miami can get in the end zone. It's kind of scary. It's kind of scary, to be honest with you. I'm curious to see what the Bills' defense ownership will be like. Next game, Jaguars at Bengals. Manny over under 44. Jacksonville 4.5 point favorites. Leonard Fournette, man, the volume king. Right now, I just uploaded the newest projections from Osmo.com. He is projected to be 41% owned on FanDuel and 39% right now on DraftKings. Do we run it back with the high volume king right now and this dream matchup essentially against the Cincinnati Bengals?
Yeah, there's only two defenses worse than the Atlanta Falcons, which we were talking about earlier. One is obviously Miami. I think they might break records of how bad they're going. And then the other one is Cincinnati, ranked 31st, right in front of Miami. So, and they're not good against the pass nor the run. Equally a bad team, equally a bad defense at least. You mentioned the things you need to, right? Someone in the YouTube chat had said, is this how much Fournette is too much Fournette? I think he said, is 70% enough? I don't know. I'm contemplating the same thing, man. I have about 70% right now, and you know how I feel about running anyone that much. It's listen, he just has all the volume in the world. We're talking closer to 30 touches a game. You touch the ball anywhere near 30 touches a game or 30 touches against against Cincinnati. How much can you score? How many times can you score is the question I'll ask you, right? How many touchdowns do you want to score today? Listen, on paper, these are the plays that get people in trouble, right? Because he's going to be insanely owned, but for good reason, right? There's obviously a good reason why people are highly owned some weeks. This is one of those spots where there is not a single statistic on the board. There's not a single statistic you can look up on Mr. DFS3000.com and find that, Cincinnati can stop somehow. Listen, stop. It's not happening. This is on paper an insane matchup. If he fails, it's because, sheer variance. And when they were at the goal line, they play action, spider, 2Y, banana, whatever, and they hit the tight end for the touchdown. And Fournette didn't get in. But it's a really good matchup. The price is fair. You're getting all the volume in the world. You are a favorite. Game script is in your everything is in your favor. Don't get cute with this. If people own it, and that's what it is. And if he fails, it's one of those where you're like, I told you. No, you didn't tell me anything. I'm not going to listen to anyone's statistics on this. This is a very, very good matchup.
Yeah, I agree. He's playing over 90% of the snaps. Yeah. And, he's touching – the market share for him, I think outside of the wideouts, he's getting such a bulk majority of the market share. It's kind of hard to discredit him and say, you know what, I'm going to fade him. Because you're just basically saying, I'm going to fade someone in a great spot who's going to get a ton of volume. And you're basically hoping for an injury at that point because no matter what, he's going to produce. And, whether it's 2 yards or 3 yards here and there, he's just going to continue getting the rock. You don't have to worry about someone sharing or splitting the time with him. They've made that very apparent here the first 6 games. So, outside of Fournette, though, I think Gardner Minshew is somewhat interesting because the Cincinnati Bengals pass defense is not necessarily great. It's ranked 27th in the league. And he also does have a great few targets in DJ Shark and D.D. Westbrook, who I feel are good deep threats as well, especially against Drake Kirkpatrick, who has been horrible this season. He's given up 3 touchdowns, over 200 yards to wideouts. This is an area where he's going to be covering either DJ or D.D. Westbrook. So I don't mind that. And on the opposite side of the ball, I feel like if you're big on Jacksonville, with Jalen Ramsey gone, I kind of like Tyler Boyd for a bounce back game. I was pretty heavy on him last week. I thought Tyler Boyd was in a great spot, especially I thought with the game script narrative. I thought Ravens would be up big. They would just continue to pass. And also, some of those slot corners were struggling this season for the Ravens. Didn't really pan out that well, but I think this time with Boyd, I mean, he's running 65% of the snaps from the slot. I think losing Ramsey is going to help the entire offense for Cincinnati to at least somewhat move the ball, in my opinion. So I think that's an interesting play from the Cincinnati side. Do you feel like anything there for Cincinnati, or are you just strictly Jacksonville?
Yeah, no. So it's pretty much two guys, period. And I'll say this about Jacksonville first before I talk about Boyd. It's one of those matchups similar to Miami's matchup, right? To where if you're playing Miami, every single person on the board has a really good matchup. So I can't just say Fournette's the only one with a good matchup. So does Minshew, so does Westbrook if he plays, and so does Chark, right? Like they all have really good matchups. So if any one of them goes off, are you surprised? Absolutely not. So to say definitively this is the guy, I temper my expectations just a little bit because everyone here has a good shot at scoring a ton of points. And then what I think is for certain is that the Jaguars probably have a lead here. And if that's the case, and again, Cincinnati has to play from behind, then Boyd makes a lot of sense. He had a horrible game last week. And he still had 7 targets. Like it's not like he didn't even see the ball. Like they tried. Dalton tried, and he just couldn't get to him. Marlon Humphrey just played a good game against him. That's all it was. And obviously now with the secondary just being a little bit thinner than it was before because of no Ramsey, helps a little bit more. So I do like Boyd coming back, but to be honest, it's a lot of just Jacksonville, really.
Yeah, I mean Boyd is interesting because I mean he is fit them on all receivers and targets. He's still averaging 9.8 targets per game, even with what we saw last week, with a little dip of regression as far as production. But I think one more guy that we can maybe talk about, which in my opinion is just you have to look at these plays because and when you're entering the Millionaire Maker, you got to differentiate yourself sometimes. But I think if you wanted to pivot from Boyd and go to Auden Tate, and hear me out here, the last 4 games, Auden Tate has played 88.5% of the snaps. But in those 4 games, 7 red zone targets, 4 deep targets, and he's seen a quarter of the entire targets as far as how the passes that Dalton has thrown. So Tate is a cheaper option. However, though, just looking at it from as far as being sneaky and not necessarily ownership, I think Auden Tate could be somewhat interesting in this matchup, especially if Jacksonville goes up and, Bengals are surrendering to just the passing game.
Yeah, for sure. I think I'm right there with you. Fine contrarian play if you wanted to, not just play Boyd and plug and play Boyd. If you wanted Tate, I think totally fine.
Next matchup, Vikings at Lions. Minnesota 2.5 point favorites going on the road in Detroit. A Detroit team that apparently I was in Mexico. I couldn't watch the game. It wasn't on for me. But from what I saw on Twitter, it seemed like a lot of disgruntled fans, a lot of controversy. 43.5 over under here. Stephon Diggs in this game. We saw what he did last week. Dalvin Cook now probably in a position to probably get the rock a little bit more against this Lions run D. How do we feel, Manny? Are we attacking this game even though the 43.5 over under is a little bit low?
Yeah, I think this is pretty low to the point where, I mean, I know how good Minnesota's defense is. How good is Detroit's defense? That's kind of what we have to figure out. And I think they're middle of the road, right? If anything, they actually do a decent job against the pass at times. So if anything, it could feature a lot of just Dalvin Cook. And if that's the case, I mean, I don't know if the game really shoots out at all. So I kind of agree with Vegas here. I think maybe a lot of Kerryon Johnson, a lot of Dalvin Cook. If that's the case, hard for me to go to Golladay, even though, a 5.8 price tag I think is pretty appealing. And then if I wanted to pick between Thielen and Diggs again, I think I'd go back to Thielen, but I'm not really high on any one of these guys. I think finally the Kirk Cousins stuff just cools down a little bit, and they go back to feeding Dalvin Cook, play a more defensive-minded game. At least that's how I have it projected. So I have this as a middle-of-the-road game. Maybe pick and choose your spots. I think Dalvin's probably my favorite.
Yeah, I mean, Dalvin's going to be facing a Detroit Lions rush D that gives up the 3rd most fantasy points allowed to the running back. And I mean, obviously, we know Dalvin's a workhorse. Different situation this week compared to one of the best rush defenses last week. I think it's kind of hard to ignore Dalvin in this spot. And then obviously, I think the wideouts are in play. I think the biggest question is maybe the other side of the ball for Detroit. I think Galladay could be somewhat interesting. But to be honest with you, with the Vikings D and with their rushing game, I don't really see too much of time of possession for the Lions, which kind of scares me. I really think that this is a game where Minnesota kind of controls it, and the 43 over under leads me to believe that Vegas is what they're seeing is a lot of rushing from the Vikings, a lot of controlling the clock, a lot of slow pace, and a lot of limiting from the Detroit side of the ball. So as far as anything for me, outside of Dalvin Cook, maybe not so much as last week with the offense. And then for the Lions, there's really nothing for me at this point.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you.
Raiders at Packers. Green Bay 5-point favorites. Manny over under 47. The Raiders on a 2-game winning streak. Packers coming off a referee win. Is that the best way to put it? a lot of momentum there. I swear to you, I saw someone posted on Twitter. I thought it was hilarious of a ref doing the Lambeau leap, and everyone was holding up the ref after the game, and it was crazy because I had no idea what was going on, but it was making me laugh to see that. So a lot of salty fans out there, and I mean I don't mind, but yeah. So this game, Manny, how do we feel about this? And are we seeing anyone from the Raiders side of the ball?
Yeah, so I'll talk about the easy side first, the Raiders. There really never really is much on this side outside of 3 guys, really. I think one is kind of out of the question, Tyrell Williams. And then how much do you want Josh Jacobs and how much do you want Darren Waller, right? And we know how they feel about Darren Waller after he signed the extension or whatever, right? So I think, he's here to stay. He's probably their best option right now when they don't have the lead. But when they do have the lead, Josh Jacobs is the guy. And for me, I don't think they have the lead. They've had the lead 2 weeks in a row. So we've seen a 29-touch game in week 5 from Josh Jacobs, which I don't think happens again. I think he's more in the 20 range. If that's the case, then I don't know how much I like Josh Jacobs. Remember, he's not one that's heavily involved in the passing game either. Had 3 catches and 2 catches the last 2 games respectively. So if they are down, which Vegas suggests they will, I don't really like Josh Jacobs too much. And then I like Waller, but I think there's a few tight ends ahead of him that I like a little bit better on the slate. And then on the other side, I want to play some Green Bay. Just who's playing, who's not playing, and we probably won't have that till 11:30 Sunday morning. So really tough to say. And I want to start going through all the scenarios, but we'd be here forever, right? No Devontae Adams. Allison's trending like he's not playing, but MVS hasn't practiced. So are we going to the Lazard clown again, or like who are like? There's so many different scenarios that could play out here. It's hard to tell, really.
Yeah, I think Darren Waller is in a good spot simply just because he's getting his targets, but his targets come with depth as far as air yards and in those plays. And so for me as a tight end, you're not just getting these short dump offs. You're getting big plays for Darren Waller, which is more appealing, especially in a PPR format. So I think Darren Waller is definitely someone to consider. Outside of that, though, looking at the Green Bay offense, this running back tandem here, they go with the hot hand, essentially, but they always have almost the same number of snaps, which is kind of weird. So essentially, it's like you're trying to figure out who can you go with, and that's the biggest, discrepancy with the running back, with the rushing offense for Green Bay is, can I roster Jamal? Can I roster Aaron Jones? It's really hard to decipher, and it's kind of like you got to just have a few shares of both and get one of them right because they're both not going to go off. It's going to be one or the other. We've kind of seen that over the last few weeks. But, I mean, outside of that, Raiders are not good as far as pass rush. I think Aaron Rodgers this week could be in a spot where if essentially his targets can catch the ball, you're looking at a guy who will have a lot of time in the pocket. And I think if he has a lot of time in the pocket, he can do some damage. So, interesting game. I don't know how I feel about it too much yet. I think I got to wait till Sunday, like you said, a little bit longer and digest it a little bit more. But, I mean, right now, I think Darren Waller's, as far as confidence play, I like Darren Waller at tight end.
Yeah, fair enough. I think I'm right there with you.
Next game, we go into Indianapolis, battle for first place of the division, Texans at Colts, over under 47. Colts, 1-point favorites at home against the Texans. Texans coming off a big win against the Chiefs, as is the Colts, both winning in Kansas City. A lot of weapons in this game as far as the passing and the running game, essentially. I mean, what we've seen in Hyde the last few weeks and what we've seen in Mack, guys are 2 workhorses that are getting the carries. Is this a game shootout potential?
I think so, but they're not projecting that well for me, really, and it's a few things. So, kind of ranking the defenses and where they stand, I think Houston has been borderline top 10 this year, which I think is pretty impressive. And then if you look at Indy, because of some injuries, they don't rank too high, and they're in the bottom third. Like they're closer to like Washington, Arizona range than they are even middle of the pack. But I think it's because of the injuries that played a part in the beginning of the season. So for me, it's kind of sneaky. I see this game. I think it's a true 47 total game with possibly going to 45 for me, only because Houston's not at home; they're on the road. I think Indy is pretty underrated, if you ask me. I think they'd love to run Mac as much as they can, but how good of a matchup really is it? And then how healthy is the Indy team for me? So I don't mind if you want to go to Watson to Hopkins or Fuller. I think that's okay. I also don't mind if you wanted to have some shares of TY or some shares of Mac by themselves to run it back, which is what I'm doing. But it's not a game that projects to be a shootout for me for some odd reason. And I don't know. It could be just kind of where pricing is for some of these guys, like Deshaun Watson being $7K on DK. That's his highest price tag he's been all season. Like Fuller, when he went off, wasn't even close to the price range he's at now. He's 6'2" now, right? Also the most expensive he's been all season. When he went off, he was 4'5". So I think the price is kind of prohibitive for me. But if you wanted to go here, yeah, I think there is some sneaky potential, but it's not one that I project. It's one that I'm just going off just sheer variance.
Yeah, I mean, you look at these two teams, and they both had the same type of strategy against the Chiefs, and that was just to run heavy. Let's get as many carries as we can, because I mean, the Chiefs defense is just struggling against the run, as we've seen the first few weeks before last night. I mean, they were not getting pressure on the quarterback. Their front four was getting demolished by any offensive line. But I think this week what we see is maybe a little bit of a different narrative. I think we see more of the passing game from both sides. Yes, we know Mac is a workhorse, going to get his 20 carries regardless. Houston front four a little bit more stingy as far as defensively and what they give up as far as fantasy points to running backs. So for me, I think Mac is definitely, you could have some shares. I wouldn't go too crazy, but I think I like T.Y. Hilton in this spot. I think I like Hopkins. I think the passing game is where I want to put my focus this week, especially with these guys who are high volume. I mean, you got Fuller, you have Hopkins, and you have Hilton, who are all high volume targets. And I think in this type of matchup, you have some corners for the Houston Texans defense that struggle significantly. And you're looking at Bradley Roby and Aaron Colvin, both who have struggled against wide receiver number ones and in the slot. So if T.Y. Hilton's on the outside or the inside, I think he's going to be matched up with either one of those corners. I think it's going to be a great spot for him in a bounce back game, considering what we saw last week against KC. First week, he hasn't scored a touchdown, was limited to only 37 yards receiving. But outside of that, I think Deshaun Watson, I'm curious to see what his ownership will be come Sunday. Jacoby Brissett, not really too much there, but I definitely like the wideouts here in this game.
Yeah, for sure. By the way, the whole TY thing, how good he is against the Texans, that's not why you should be playing him. It's because he's actually in a good spot, right? It's not because, he's been incredible against this team. The whole clown mask, whatever. Listen, he's just in a good spot. Don't try to find a narrative streak for this.
And he usually catches the ball when it's thrown to him. He ranks third in the league as far as highest percentage of targets caught by a wide receiver. So I mean, if a ball's getting thrown his way, he's usually coming down with it. So it gives you confidence to know that you can roster him. Cardinals at Giants, over under 51. Oh my God, this is going to be a smash spot. It seems like New York Giants 3-point favorites. I mean, let's just talk about all the offensive plays that I guess are going to be rostered here, because it seems like a lot of these plays from this game and ownership are pretty high.
Yeah, no, it's where do you want to begin, right? I think both sides have pretty decent matchups. First, on one side, Daniel Jones and company go up against what is the 30th ranked defense. They're not good against the pass or the run. So how much of the Giants do you want? The problem is they're not the healthiest, right? And again, I think Shepard, I saw this morning again, wasn't going to go this week, right? So do you like Tate all that much? Do you like and it's kind of weird because Ingram coming back, I think now perfectly in play. He is by far the best receiver there, but what do you do with Tate? How involved can Tate be? And then what does the running game look like? So for me, it's I love the matchup. Just who's going to be in, who's going to be out, who are the great matchups here? I think they all have good matchups, but just kind of waiting and see. What I know for sure is Ingram does have a really good spot. Practice in full, he's ready to go. I think he is a top 5 tight end this week. And that's how I'm treating. I think he's a top 5 tight end every week, but that's how I'm treating him this week, at least as my lineups are concerned. And then on the other side, do we get 350 and 3 TDs, Kyler Murray, or do we get 250 and no TDs, Kyler Murray? Because it seems like he's nowhere. There's no in between for him. He's either really good or really bad, and it's always like 17, 18, 19 points or 25 to 31. There's just no in between. And if you look at the games, it's so funny. It's 340, 3 TDs, 250, 0, 240, 0. There's a 350, 0, 170 and 2, but then he could go 300 and 2. So like, which one do we get? If we get the good one, which I think we can, obviously. I love this matchup too. To both bottom third of the league defenses. Yeah, I think he's in a prime spot, and then clear pairings with him this week too. So I love this game. I think the 2 games of the week that everyone will be on will be this one and the Rams game. So an easy yes for me.
Let's talk about David Johnson real quick.
Sure.
Third highest priced running back this week on DraftKings. And someone who is still heavily involved in the offense. Some people mentioned that Chase Edmonds is taking over. I mean, David Johnson is still 80% of the snaps. And although the rushing game hasn't been as productive, where he's torching defenses is in the passing game. And I mean, he's getting a large amount of target shares, but it's the yards after the catch. And he's also scoring, which is helping drive kind of his production this season. He's going to be facing a bottom 5 Giants rush defense who struggled against running backs and also pass catching backs. As far as the Awesemo projections right now, I was trying to see where he's going to be at. He's second. So currently right now, Manny, he is second right under Fournette as far as ownership on both DraftKings and FanDuel. Oh, not on DraftKings, but on FanDuel he is. DraftKings, he's a little bit down at 17.3%, but on FanDuel, he is 39.7%. How do we feel about David Johnson outside of Kyle Murray? Is this the week where maybe we see the running game get it going? Because we know about the passing game, but how do we feel about David Johnson as far as a running back, as far as a top 5 play this week?
Yeah, for me, anytime you have to rely on the passing game work for any running back, that should be a problem, right? He still doesn't have a 100-yard rushing game this season. He came close with 91 against Cincinnati, but who wouldn't come close against Cincinnati if you have 17 carries, right? The fact of the matter is he doesn't see many carries either. So that's the issue for me. If he was seeing, 15 to 20 carries a game, sure, but look at all the games in between where he had 7 attempts one game, 11 the other game. The last week out against Atlanta, he had 12. You're not even close to 20 rushing attempts. So for me to just expect on, anywhere from 11 to 15 carries, 100-yard game, kind of foolish for me, and we've seen that. He hasn't been there yet. So if it wasn't for he doesn't have a single bonus yet. If you're talking DraftKings, doesn't have a 100-yard bonus in either rushing or receiving. So where's the upside really? I think it has to come in the passing game for him. And for me, if I'm relying on passing game work for running back, it's kind of tough here. So I'm not high on David Johnson. I'm really not. I think if I were to go here, it'd be more Kyler Murray and the pass catchers. And even then, it's kind of iffy because does Kirk play or not? Still with the questionable limited tag. So if he's out there, sure, I kind of like the pass catchers a little bit more. But if he's not, I think it might be looking like a naked Kyler week. And I'm not a huge fan of naked quarterbacks anymore. So kind of tough. I'm not really on David Johnson, to be honest.
So, speaking of Kyle Murray and going naked and talking about these pass catchers, one guy that's really high on the projection model as far as ownership is Larry Fitzgerald. Looking at this secondary, we've kind of attacked it all season so far. We know that they're young. We know that they're inexperienced, but they have been getting torched. Janoris Jenkins, DeAndre Baker, 2 of these guys who have given up a combined 4 touchdowns and over 600 yards receiving so far. Fitzgerald is interesting. The only thing that stresses me or concerns me is the fact that it's these short dump-off passes with Kyle Murray. I haven't seen, outside of Demarius Byrd and his 54-yard catch this past week against the Falcons, we don't really see the deep ball, which is what we crave and what we want, especially those big plays. And also with Fitzgerald, outside of that first week against Detroit, we haven't seen too much, enough to warrant that this is such a great play. So I wanted to ask you, I know you said naked Kyler, but is Fitzgerald becoming a little bit overrated?
I think so. And I've said this about this team pretty much every week. It's they throw the ball 5 yards downfield, which is nothing. It's pretty much just slants the entire game, or drag routes across the defense the entire game. And if Kyler can't find one, he scrambles. To me, I mean that's not upside for me. I want to, like, Tyreek didn't do anything yesterday. All of a sudden, scampers for a 57-yard touchdown. It feels like that can never happen in this offense. Like, no matter how many games they play, it just feels like it can't. They don't even have like Fitzgerald definitely won't do that. But if you don't even give them a chance, then they for real won't do that. So it's frustrating. I really dislike it. But PPR is a thing. So I guess in full point PPR sites, sure, they still make sense. But if you're looking for touchdowns and yardage, I mean, probably wrong team to look at week to week.
One more guy I want to talk about before we go into these later games is Saquon Barkley, third highest owned on FanDuel. Right now, he seems to be the fifth or sixth highest owned running back on DraftKings. As we know, he's coming back off a high ankle sprain injury. Saw some people talking about in chat that it's not worth it to roster him. But in my opinion, when you're looking at a running back like Saquon and the talent level, if he's playing, he has the opportunity to go off. I mean, is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, of course. I mean, if he's out there, it's because he feels good enough to play. We saw the videos last week where he didn't end up playing, but he looked incredible. At least he looked normal in warmups. And I thought he would have tried to give it a go last week, but now for sure he will. And the only thing stopping me is he is the most expensive player by a landslide on DraftKings, right? It's not even he's almost 1,000 more expensive than the next highest priced player. And can he pay off almost a 9K price tag? I think he can. He's Saquon, and this isn't a dream matchup for anyone, right? Everyone loves playing the Cardinals. So yes, he can. It's just you're going to have to make some serious sacrifices to fit him in, depending where you're playing.
14.5% projected ownership right now on DraftKings, 34.5% projected ownership on FanDuel. And I want to say this is that recently with the losing streak of the Cowboys, this division is very much up in air, Manny. So I think if this is the time where they can get him rolling against a team where they think that they might have an opportunity to win, I mean, don't get me wrong, but if you're one game out of your division and it's still, halfway through the season, you're going to want to go ahead and play your best players. And so I think in this matchup, if he does play, I think it's a dream spot. I think, obviously he's too talented to be stopped by pretty much anyone. And I think we can't have a high ankle sprain that he had a few weeks ago discredit the fact that he can go off.
Yeah. I mean, if you're talking pure upside, what other running back has more, right? I don't think that exists. Maybe CMC. That's it. Nothing else. So I'm right there with you. If you're talking pure upside, if you want to, compare it to his ownership in tournaments, you have the right idea. You have the right person and the right player. Yes.
Just a few more games left, guys. Don't forget, we're talking about ownership here. We're talking about Fantasy Cruncher, all these models, all these different tools and resources we use. You can also use them too if you don't have them yet at Osmo.com, working with Alex Baker, aka Osmo, the #1 daily fantasy player in the world. Got a nice little discount code. If you're looking to try it for a month, 50% off. Just use the code NFL Strategy. Go to the NFL landing page for Osmo.com. There's a bunch of cool videos that kind of break down all the tools, all the resources, so you kind of know what you're getting before you get involved. But use the code NFL Strategy. And for everyone in here, thank you for supporting us as always. We would appreciate it. Just give us a thumbs up, share this, subscribe. You guys definitely are the ones that help make this stream continue to go and help us provide content every day. So we would love and appreciate those thumbs up, guys. All right, last few games, Manny. 49ers at Redskins, over under 41. San Fran 10-point favorites on the road. I mean, what's there to say? 49ers blew me away this past week as far as shutting down Goff in that passing offense. And you mean to tell me now they're going to go against the Redskins, one of the worst teams in the league? I mean, this is a smash spot for the 49ers defense.
Yeah, I mean, it's you can't ask for anything better. This is a horrible offense. Vegas has this being a landslide win for for San Fran. It's just San Fran is such a tough team to play. Like outside of their defense, which we know how volatile defense is, you can't even lock in a defense ever. Especially when they're on the road here. I don't know. Some miracle, Washington will come out ahead in this game somehow. But yeah, that's probably the only way. Like you don't really play Garoppolo on one side. There's not real pass catchers to pair with him outside of Kittle anyway. He doesn't really air the ball all that much. They run a ton, and then on Washington, I don't like anyone outside of McLaurin, right? Like I there's absolutely no one I like. So and that's that. You know, from week to week, I don't even know if they have other receivers that are even playable, which is different. So for me, it's scrap the whole game. I don't like anyone. I have no one. I have no interest. Too low of a total. This is almost in the 30s, man. I have no interest.
We talked about Matt Ryan earlier. He's gotten 300 yards every game this season so far. Jimmy Garoppolo, the complete opposite. He's yet to get 300 yards passing, even though he's having a good net efficiency as far as his passing. But regardless of the matchup, it's like you said, they like to run the ball, and they like to use a few weapons to run the ball. And so I think Tevin Coleman could be in play because over the last 2 games, man, he's had 10 red zone opportunities, which I mean is pretty high for someone who's considered a running back second option behind Matt Breida. And Matt Breida could be interesting, but I think Tevin Coleman is the one that you probably want to look at. I feel like he's a little bit more explosive. He's been more involved in the passing game. And I mean, if he's getting those snaps and getting those shares, I think that's a good opportunity. But outside of that, I don't even like anyone to play back in this game as far as the Washington offense. I mean, the 49ers defense is just that good. And so in regards to maybe Terry McLaurin, as far as running it back, if you're looking at game stack, which I don't think you should, I don't think it's an optimal play. But as far as just choosing anyone, yeah, if you want to be cute and be contrarian, that's fine. But this offense alone, outside of Terry McLaurin's, 2 catches and okay, Adrian Peterson, whatever, he had 90 something yards. They're not good. So, right. and I mean, they struggled still against a Dolphins team. So if you're telling me now that they're going to go against one of the best defenses in the league, it's just not a good matchup. And I really don't see anything coming out of this game.
Yep. Leave it alone, in my opinion.
Chargers at Titans, over under 41. Tennessee, 2.5-point favorites. Keenan Allen, where's he been the last 2 games?
Yeah, no, where's he been? I think ever since Melvin Gordon back, it made the backfield. Ever since Melvin Gordon came back, it made the backfield almost unplayable with the way they're splitting carries. Like none of them have real upside. They've been expensive. Keenan Allen has disappeared for 3 weeks now, to the point where he barely had 10 points combined the last 2 weeks. I think they get on. I think they bounce back in a big way. And then on Tennessee, it's they don't have any more Mariota. Now it's Tannehill. I know because I saw him in Miami. The guy's awful. It's a 41 total, and Tennessee is favored. This game screams disaster all over the place. So the only spot I see that people might go to is the "What have you done for me lately" spot. Hunter Henry, right? They saw the 2 touchdowns for 100 yards and think he's the next Antonio Gates. Very well could be, but I'm not sure how great of a matchup this is. I think it's fine. I have him as the 3rd highest tight end on my board, but it's not a spot where I have him 30-40% of my lineups. Not even close. So I don't really have much of this game, to be honest.
I just want to point something out real quick and try to help me understand what is wrong, because in my opinion, I think Melvin Gordon has hurt this offense drastically. I feel like they had a lot of momentum. They just were able to move the ball efficiently. And now I feel like they don't know what the hell to do because they want to make this guy happy, or they're trying to force it. But in reality, I think it's hurting them tremendously. And this is one thing I want to point out. Keenan Allen, first 3 games, 10 targets, 15 targets, 17 targets, 7 red zone targets, 3 touchdowns, 400 yards. Okay. The last 3 games, since Melvin Gordon was officially listed as active against Miami, Denver, Pittsburgh, 5 targets, 6 targets, 6 targets, a total of 11 catches, not even 100 yards, no touchdowns, 1 red zone target.
Yeah, it's horrible. The Steelers were very clear in what they were going to do, right? They doubled him almost the entire game, and they were open about it. They said they were going to do it before the week started. They said they were going to do it, and they said they did it after the week started. We saw the game, and he was doubled the whole time. Denver was a really, really tough matchup. And then, it wasn't him who got the touchdowns in Miami. It's been a brutal 3-week stretch. But what scares me about these top receivers is once you see the double team work against someone, like it's worked against DeAndre, like it's worked against Julio, like it's worked against Keenan, other teams pick up and start doing the same thing. Because look, they just lost to a Pittsburgh team with barely a quarterback, right? They lost to a Denver team. Both of those games were at home. Like, inexcusable losses, and it's just double Keenan and they have no one. If they do it again, I mean, you can't play anyone in the backfield. They keep splitting carries, and then Hunter Henry's the only guy. That's why he had the touchdown. So I guess Hunter Henry, again, somewhat in play, but it's a really, really tough spot to gauge. And, man, it could possibly be another trap this week. I wouldn't be surprised.
I just feel like, before we saw Melvin Gordon come in, I feel like they just had a structured game plan. I feel like they knew how they wanted to spread the ball around. I feel like they had a good game script and a good scheme. And then I feel like, with Melvin back, it just kind of switched up everything, where we're seeing now the ball being spread in weird directions and people just not being able to be put in position to produce. So, right. Regardless of Hunter Henry returning or not, that's not the issue. The issue is that you have these guys who are pretty elite, and Keenan Allen, and to be honest with you, Austin Eckler was playing incredibly before.
He's Melvin always Gordon. Been a really good running back.
Yeah. So I mean, two talented guys, and you're mean to tell me that you don't want to give them the ball more? It doesn't make sense. I feel like Austin Eckler, where he thrives, is in that passing game, in those screens and in those dump offs, and they're not even doing that for him.
Yep.
It's very frustrating. Yep. Saints at Bears, last two games, Manny, over under 38 here, the lowest on the slate, actually. Chicago, 3.5-point favorites. Wow, 38 over under. Wow, what do we think about this?
You're not playing any quarterback. The only thing with Michael Thomas is, thankfully, Teddy Bridgewater knows that's the man, right? And he's continued to give him as many targets as he can handle, 12 and 13 the last two games respectively. So I love that. Other than that, it's and that's just a volume play because obviously the matchup isn't great. And then on the other side, the offense already sucks to begin with, and now they play a Saints defense that I think could do enough to stop them. I really don't think this is a good enough offense where we need to look at the Bears and be like, yo, we need to play X. Like, it doesn't. No, not for me, especially when this is the lowest total we have, right? I believe it is. Yeah, it is the lowest total we have. No, thank you. This is worse than Buffalo and Miami, and this is in Chicago. No thanks.
Michael Thomas, target machine. It's like you said, it's a security blanket for Teddy Bridgewater. He knows he needs to go to that guy a certain amount of times. I think outside of him, though, I don't really see anything. I think Alvin Kamara, we're still trying to figure out with his injury if he's still questionable if he'll play.
Yeah, I don't have any read on it. Even if realistically, what's the upside against this team, right? So,
yeah, I mean, and we also saw last week. I mean, Latavius Murray seemed to be more on the field than Kamara. Yep. So that's another concern too. So I think if you're, he's too high priced to kind of take that risk. Yeah, it could be contrarian, but are you going to get the production out of him or the snaps and the opportunities that you're looking for? Considering what we've seen with this split backfield with Murray and them probably being a little bit hesitant because of the injury, I'm not necessarily sure that's the right play.
If he's out, because they're not practicing at all, so if he's out, Latavius would be the guy. But even then, again, really bad matchup. The game script probably doesn't favor them either. It's just a really tough spot, man.
Last game, Ravens at Seahawks, over under 49. Seattle 3-point favorites. Russell Wilson playing like an absolute stud this year. My main guy right now is Chris Carson. Seems to be just a workhorse these last few weeks. And what I like about that is the fact that he had a few fumbles, but they said, you know what, this is our guy. We're going to continue rolling. And he's been steamrolling ever since. How about this game, Manny? Over under 49 is pretty high, but the weather, 53 degrees, raining. Does that affect us at all as far as fantasy production?
Yeah, I think no. It rains too much over there. First of all, I don't take weather into account at all, so it doesn't matter for me. We have 3 straight games with no fumbles for Carson. 3 straight games of 20+ fantasy points. I think the fumbles are the correlation here. I want to say he's in a fine spot again. I absolutely love the spot. I have Russell Wilson with his pass catchers as a top 3 pairing this week behind Ryan and Goff, so I love him. If you wanted to run some Lamar Jackson coming back. I think totally fine. Lamar Jackson is putting up not just quarterback, but like really good running back numbers while he's playing too. He had 19 for 152 and a TD. That sounds like McCaffrey, like a McCaffrey line in any week. So I absolutely love it. I think both, and I have them both third and fourth, right behind Ryan and Goff. So it's like I have two games at the top of my list, and this is the second game. So yeah, for me, it's also a top tight end spot where you have Mark Andrews, and then if you want to look at some receiver spots, I think Lockett and Metcalf are also in play. Remember, no Disley. So I think it's pretty much just concentrated on them now. Makes it a little bit easier to project, not just Seattle, but on the other side, I think Mark Andrews slam dunk this week.
I like Tyler Lockett. Ravens struggle significantly against slot receivers. Majority of Lockett's snaps come out of the slot significantly. DK Metcalf seems to be the guy completely on the outside. And I mean, don't get me wrong, Chris Carson, he's turning into essentially like a Leonard Fournette with what we've seen with the production, how many attempts he's getting pass catching opportunities. Seeing a guy to be able to produce at his level and not necessarily have anyone to affect him either. I mean, CJ Prosise is not necessarily a guy that is scaring him, nor Penny. So I like Carson in this matchup, especially with the weather and maybe the game script. Maybe this is a smash mouth type game where we see more carries than we see more air yards.
Yeah, I think you're right on it, man. As long as the volume is there, which it clearly is, they love running the football too, which is even better. Yeah, I love it. I'm right there with you. Mm-hmm.
All right, guys. Well, once again, thank you for joining us. We're going to go ahead and close this out. For everyone in the chat, thank you for staying along. Thank you for supporting us. Once again, give us the thumbs up, like, subscribe so you get notified when these shows happen. You know, we can't do this without you guys, so continue to support. We appreciate it greatly. Before we close this out, Manny, where can we go ahead and find you and anything coming up?
Yeah, so on Twitter, @MLaura, like my name. Everything that I do is there, coming out with more new features as the days go by on fantasycruncher.com, of course. And then if you want to watch my live streams, go live right after this. Today, I'm just taking a bunch of questions, trying to answer everyone's questions before we get to Sunday morning stream. It'll be at twitch.tv/MLaura.
All right, guys. And for me, @Chris Randone, as you know. And once again, use the code NFL Strategy. Get 50% off if you're not using these tools and resources yet. But good luck this weekend. Play good players. Don't hesitate. Follow your process. And we wish you guys the best of luck. You guys have a great weekend.